This is a screencast designed to give back a mock Edexcel IGCSE Paper 1 Section A test to my Year 11 class this year. The idea is that I created a paper using a relatively recent AQA pre-release. Now, it's a passage of non-fiction, as always, taken from a pre-release 2010, and the pre-release itself, the whole pre-release, and the question paper, as it were, for this mock can be found on the blog, where I'm assuming you found this screencast. If you found it on my school YouTube channel, then the blog that you need to go to is www.jwpblog.wordpress.com. There's a link to that in the top right hand corner of the YouTube header. It's my own blog, and you will find all the details there. So, thinking about it. The first question asked you to identify four suggestions that there might be bad weather and bad conditions at the time of the Olympics taking place. And the theory is that you shouldn't have had to try too far to see these sort of ideas coming through. Smog, squatting, and whether you're me or somebody else, squatting is not only wrestlers, it's also beginning to defecate. Thoroughly negative. If you've used squats, you can use smog, but if you've used smog on the top, don't just write it down again, because really that won't get you anywhere at all. That will just be repeating it. The cloud of murk, on the other hand, would be a third point, easily achieved, which is what you're trying to get here, 3 marks. And then you might have used one or two other things if you really wanted to. I would certainly have expected one or two students, and one or two did, to pick up, for example, the noun Paul. You may not know that noun. It may not be something you're familiar with, and I will explain in a moment, just after I've put up what I think are the ways to get your mark, that the Paul is a cloth in which to wrap dead bodies. Not terribly pretty, but that's the way it goes. So, moving on. Question 2. As in all questions of this type in the Edexcel paper, the key to getting full marks in this question is the in your own words. Do not quote. You are being tested to see that you understand the passage. You're not at this point being required to analyse, spend any time working with connotations of words or reasons that words have been chosen. You are simply showing that you understand the passage. The focus, therefore, the conditions prevalent in the run-up, all of them. Now, again, notice here, these are the conditions, not whether or not what he's saying is true, and also not actually necessarily detail a scientific analysis, but only the conditions. There are 4 marks for 4 separate ideas. And I noticed in this question that some students didn't seem to be aware of the use of the word prevalent. Prevalent meaning to be widespread, to be in use or present at any given time, in commonality. Again, it's not complicated language, and it's formal academic tone and language that I would expect that you might face when you come to do a paper such as this. Question 3, another really short answer, remember, is only 1 mark. Therefore, you're trying to just identify what is going on here. I've put the paragraph in question there at the top right. A short quotation will nail the mark. You are asked to identify and quote. And really any answer that shows a recognition of the shift from descriptive writing to a more factual tone with a quotation will get you your mark. What we're looking at here, of course, is our old trapper's friend, polls and statistics, and suddenly here they are. We can find them up here. We can also find them down here. And some people did talk about the use of the WHO or even the BBC as strong, clear, trustworthy organisations. At this stage, there is no need to worry too much about whether these figures are true or how the author shows that there might be an alternative position. Because that is what question 4 is about. Question 4 is the time where you put together all your responses, in a sense, into a coherent short essay. 12 marks are on offer for a question of this type in the exam. That's a fifth of the paper. Put it another way, it's 14% of your entire GCSE. Put that another way, this single question is worth 4% more than either of your two pieces of written coursework. There is a message here, and it's a message that I'm trying to get across to my students all the time. Anyway, for this question, you do need to analyse, you do need to quote, you do need to explain. In short, you can peel over this one, and it's what you need to do. 12 marks, I would argue 4 pearls will get you these marks. A point, evidence, analysis, a bit of relation back to the question, and then moving on. Again, the way that I would do this is to think of your trapper's mnemonic in terms of how you would write creatively to get your point of view across in a piece of moderately persuasive information text. Don't be afraid to use material from the earlier questions you've answered. That is, in a way, the whole point. You're building up your little bank in questions, in this case 1, 2 and 3, to enable you to answer question 4. And use the bullets. That's what they're there for, and use a separate paragraph for each bullet. Make the bullet your topic sentence, and above all, make the examiner's job easy. They may have hundreds of papers to mark in a relatively short time. Make their job easy, and they will love you for it. So ideas that we can use for this might well be to look for, knowing our trappers, for example, emotive language. You've already picked these up. This is in essence what question 1 was about. So why not go back to those first 3 paragraphs and then begin to have a look? We look, as we know, our favourite here, the pall of smog that squats over this city. You could work with pall and squats. Connotations of death, connotations of defecation, dirt, misery, strength. You can work with any of those. We had a blue sky on Sunday, then the sun went missing. I had a 3-second sighting of it. Humour. A lot of you sort of missed humour. There's a lot of humour running through this passage. Again, this idea of the excitement about a 3-second sighting of the sun, or the idea of the moderate personification, perhaps, of the sun itself, in that it can go missing like some errant teenager. Again, either of those ideas would work very nicely. You could spend time talking about the strange silver grey dome, and if you were going to spend time talking about the strange silver grey dome, it's this word I'd want you to think about. Think about how unusual it is, and this one about how solid the whole thing is. Not just that it's the sky, somehow it's trapped in a solid, upturned bowl. Going on, same paragraph, of course. And then you've got this idea, the Chinese say it's just a foggy day in Beijing town. You may well not be old enough to pick up the little allusion there to a well-known song of the 30s, A Foggy Day in London Town. But what you might want to pick up is the idea of the lethal smog. Whether or not it is lethal, who knows? But lethal means deadly, lethal means killing. It is a very, very, very clear example of emotive language. And finally, a comment just beginning to come in about the Chinese themselves. Why are the helicopters said to have a paranoid buzz? We just begin to get the tone beginning to come through in this piece that the writer, in his point of view, sees the Chinese as, well, as paranoid, as not trusting foreigners, as prone to lie about the condition that the city is in, to play it down at all costs, and in short, to sort of try and pull a smog of their own round the conditions under which these Olympics are due to take place. Any of these ideas, or a couple of them, would work really nicely. You could have used one whilst discussing emotive language and brought one in a final paragraph, as long as it wasn't the same device, if you see what I mean, maybe use of metaphor or the use of humour maybe as the final paragraph, to nail your final few marks. In the bullets, you're asked to talk about fact and opinion. Now, you've already mentioned that there are polls and statistics, so surely we go there, don't we? We remember to analyse, and this is the point where you can begin to make the comment between the trustworthy sources, such as the World Health Organization, and his comment that the Chinese are producing their own figures that are way short of these trustworthy figures and therefore not to be trusted. His point of view coming across clearly. Always try and use the whole piece. You were asked again about point of view, and there's a nice idea here This paragraph at the end of the section I gave you, although it's not the end of the article, is a nice evaluation. And he reaches a conclusion here, and the conclusion is that everything that's happening seems to be the result of good things in the Chinese economy. So you might want to think about how his language shows this point of view, that there is a positive to be found in what's happening in the Chinese economy at the moment, and you might want to take phenomenon as an idea, the wild uplifting surge, a lovely strong emotive passage, the freeing of the native entrepreneurial spirit. Again, this idea that there is a real sense that China is emerging into a new world, a world where their innate talent for creativity, which, let's face it, anybody who knows anything about history knows about. The Chinese seem to invent virtually everything that we use in this world, has suddenly resulted in what he calls, in this wonderful metaphor, an explosion of creativity. Solid ideas that you can begin to use to move your ideas about how his language is showing that he has a great respect and indeed probably affection for the Chinese as a race and as a people, but not for what's happening here. You might also like to look at the use of the first person plural here. You may well have done it already, but again, this idea that we are somehow complicit with the writer. We all know that pollution is a bad thing, etc., etc., etc. And there's many more examples of first plural. The beauty of first plural is we begin to trust the writer because we are part of a team. So, there you go. A relatively short podcast for a relatively short piece of work. After all, this is only section A. You should have taken around 45 minutes to do the paper, and I hope you've used this effectively to think about your responses and how to get full marks in this sort of activity. I'll leave you now, wishing you good luck, as always, in what will be a thoroughly exciting examination season. Cheerio.